Okay, it's now my pleasure to introduce Penn's president, a nationally recognized leader in inclusion, innovation, and impact in higher education. Guided by the Penn Compact 2020, the blueprint for the university's success, she has greatly expanded affordability and access for students. She has led the creation of an innovation ecosystem, epitomized by Pennovation Works and awards like the President's Engagement Prize and the Lippman Family Prize. It's sparking a Penn and a Philadelphia renaissance in entrepreneurial creativity. And she has greatly expanded the university's reach in doing good for communities locally, nationally, and globally. Please join me in welcoming one of my favorite leaders, Dr. Amy Gutmann.
Thank you, Jeff. It's great to see all of you here. And here's to everyone who has made Authors at Wharton such a vibrant part of the Penn experience. So, about 4 years ago, Adam Grant attended a conference where he met Facebook's Chief Operating Officer, Sheryl Sandberg, and her husband, Dave Goldberg. Dave was Chief Executive Officer of SurveyMonkey. Dave had read Adam's first book, Give and Take, and so invited him to join the family for dinner. Adam recounts what happened next this way. Arriving at the house, he met Sheryl and Dave's daughter, then 6, who politely inquired how his day had been. Their son, then age 8, proceeded to quote to Adam from his own book. And that was just the start. After dinner, says Adam, Sheryl began asking me questions about gender differences in my data. And when I say asking questions, I mean grilling me. I was, Adam says, terrified, but also intrigued. He spent the entire flight back to Philly reanalyzing a decade of data, and this is what he found. For the same helping behaviors, men got rewarded while women were taken for granted. For speaking up with ideas, men were more likely to be celebrated while women were either barely heard or judged, as too aggressive. It was all right in line with what Sheryl had discussed in her New York Times best-selling book, Lean In. Adam couldn't wait to tell Sheryl what he had found, and so a collaboration, and even more importantly, a friendship was born. That friendship became especially important 2 years ago, when Sheryl's beloved husband, Dave, died suddenly and unexpectedly from a heart attack. At the end of Shaloshim, the 30 days of mourning for a spouse set out in the Jewish tradition, Sheryl wrote a description of what she was experiencing on Facebook. It was the Facebook post heard round the world, read and shared and discussed and wept over by many hundreds of thousands of people across countless cultures and all walks of life. In it, Sheryl quoted her friend, Adam Grant, on how we as human beings can climb back on our feet after being knocked flat by the kind of body blow that life, sooner or later, gives us all. From that beginning came the book, Option B, Facing Adversity, Building Resilience, and Finding Joy, co-authored by Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant, which we will hear discussed today. Sheryl and Adam are two individuals with dazzling resumes. Their achievements and awards and accolades are legion. In this context, though, they're totally unnecessary to enumerate. And the point of this discussion is to realize how universal it is to suffer grief, and how important it is to develop the resilience to know how to move on, and really how important it is to have friends. Adam Grant as the Saul Steinberg Professor of Management and Professor of Psychology in the Wharton School, an admired and sought-after teacher and best-selling author of books such as Give and Take and Originals. You know Sheryl Sandberg as the Chief Operating Officer of Facebook, a best-selling author, a social activist, a philanthropist, and board chair of Sheryl Sandberg and Dave Goldberg Family Foundation, which is dedicated to building a more equal and, yes, a more resilient world. I welcome Sheryl today as an honored guest and also as a member of the Penn family. Sheryl's mother and grandfather, uncle and great-uncle were all proud Penn alums, so let's give a hand for that. Could we have Adele Sandberg, class
Yay,
of 66,
Mom.
stand up, Sheryl's mom. Take it away, Sheryl and Adam, and thank you all very, very much. Enjoy.
Thank you. This is beautiful. Thank you for being here. That's amazing.
Sheryl Sandberg.
Adam Grant, in your home territory, home turf.
This is a very long time coming. You don't know this, but in 2010, I had a student in one of my MBA classes send me this TED Talk. And I was like, oh, okay, cool, I'll watch it later. And then about an hour later, another student sent me the same talk. And within the first 3 hours, I had about a dozen emails. And I was like, this is really annoying. I'm gonna watch this talk. So I clicked on it.
I've been annoying you ever since.
It's true. But I watched the talk and I was like, oh, this is cool. It's a woman leader talking about women leaders. It's like the Seinfeld episode with the coffee table book about coffee tables. And then I watched a little further, and you were using all these studies, some of the same studies that I talked about in my own classroom. And I was like, wow, this person is kind of awesome. And then I started reading admissions essays, and there were just scores of essays where our students wrote, I'm applying to business school because I want to follow in Sheryl Sandberg's footsteps. And it happened over and over again. And then in the classroom, I would ask, what leaders do you admire? And students would name hundreds and hundreds of male leaders, and yours was basically the only female name that ever came up. And then Lean In came out, and I read Lean In, and there was this sentence that just, it hooked me. There were a lot of powerful sentences in that book, but my very favorite one was the one where you said, I was on a treadmill reading a sociology journal. Sheryl, are you aware that even sociologists don't do that?
I'm a geek. I enjoy that.
So welcome. It's such a treat to finally have you here 7 years later. Thank you for coming.
I'm so glad to be here, everyone. This is really fun.
So we're gonna talk about option B and resilience for the first half. We're gonna talk about women leadership and Lean In for the second half. I want to start talking about Dave, though. Dave gave me one of the greatest gifts I've ever received in my life, which was an introduction to you. And I wonder if you could just talk to us a little bit about how you met and what it was that made you fall in love with him.
Well, let me say again, thank you to all of you for being here. It's really, I feel very close to you all because I'm so close to Adam. I even got to talk on the speaker the other day to one of your classes early in the morning. But it's really nice to be here where Adam teaches and Adam's works, and so many of the great ideas that I've learned, I know Adam's always quoting his students as them coming from them. So it's a real honor for me. I met my husband in 1996, and were any of you born then? I had just graduated from business school. I'd gotten divorced. I moved to LA to work for McKinsey, and didn't really know anyone. I was moving far away on purpose to try to get away from what was personally painful at the time. And a friend of mine, I was dating someone, he was out of town. A friend of mine was going to dinner and a movie with a friend, so he invited me. And the three of us went to dinner and a movie, and I fell asleep on the friend's shoulder. The friend was Dave. And he thought that meant I was super into him. But he knew then, he learned later that I fall asleep on anyone's shoulder, especially in any movie. Dave became my friend. I think it was right after I got divorced. I wasn't ready to date anyone who was the right person, and I dated a bunch of the wrong person for a bunch of years. And then I said to my mom, I was dating someone and breaking up, and I just said, I don't feel lucky. This person's not, it's not working, not the right person. And then I said, whoever marries Dave Goldberg is going to be the luckiest person in the world. And he was my friend. And my mom said, well, you should really listen to that. And so Dave and I started dating, and then we got married and had 2 children. Adam knew him. Dave was brilliant. Brilliant. Dave never believed kind of what everyone else believed. He always had his own view on everything. And he wasn't afraid to say it, but he never said it in that I know more than you way. He said it in that you have your opinion, I totally respect it. But here's mine, and I feel it strongly. Dave was funny. He played a lot of April Fool's jokes, not always on April Fool's, almost always on me. Dave was a great father and a great friend, and I was lucky for a long time, and then I wasn't.
So I remember after the funeral, it was so telling. Instead of, I think a lot of people in that situation would have asked, like, how do I get through this? I've just lost this person who's the center of my world. Your question was, how do I get my kids through this? And I was struck then, as so often, by how other focused you were. When you think about all kinds of adversity or hardship, what are the most important things you've learned about how to get other people through it?
I was totally unprepared for tragedy. Dave died suddenly. We had no idea. I found him. I had to tell my children, they were 7 and 10, that their father was gone. And grief, which is something I had read about but not experienced, it's an overwhelming thing. It felt like a void closing in on me. My brother-in-law described it as a boot pushing on his chest, and I had no idea what to do. And I didn't invite anyone to the funeral. I was just in a fog. And Adam showed up. And at the end of the shiva at my house, everyone was leaving, and I asked Adam to stay. And I was like, oh, psychologist. This could be good and helpful. Seriously, I was like, maybe, and I looked at him, and I'm sure hysterical. I was like, what do I do? How am I going to get my kids through this? Like, tell me what to do. And Adam did something that might not have worked for everyone, but for me was incredibly comforting, which is he started summarizing the research. No, this is, by the way, this is the idiot's guide to how to be a good friend. Like, I know what's going to cheer you up, Sheryl. Data. Longitudinal studies. But it did. I mean, it didn't cheer me up. It didn't cheer me up. Nothing could cheer me up. But it helped. Adam said, okay, there's been one longitudinal study, very well done, of children who have gone through divorce or lost parents. And here's what it says. And then he said, here are the traps psychologists talk about, the 3 Ps, et cetera. But it didn't help lift the grief at all. But it gave me steps I could take. And what I learned with Adam, I was asking the wrong questions. How do I get my kids through it was the right question. But the wrong question I followed up on was, well, how much resilience do they have? How much resilience do I have? How do I figure out if we're going to make it? He was like, no. Resilience is a muscle. You build it. You build it in yourself. You build it in other people. Don't ask me how much you have. Ask me how to build it. And I know there are a lot of people. I just had an opportunity to meet with some amazing students. They're right here who are in a grief group on campus supporting each other. When the grief closes in, it is a complete loss of control. It feels like there's nothing you can do. And there is, in many ways, nothing you can do. So when anyone gives you any steps you can take, particularly for me, ones that social scientists had studied that they knew worked, that was a lifeline. And in many ways, the path to writing option B and forming optionb.org.
So let's talk about the 3 Ps, since you mentioned them. I remember when I first brought them up, you were like, why do you psychologists need 3 of everything? Why do they have to start with the same letter? But we talked a lot about the traps of personalization. This is my fault, pervasiveness, this is going to ruin every part of my life, permanence, I'm going to feel this way forever. And I wonder if you could just talk about getting through those.
Yeah, Adam said, look, when you face adversity, and it's not just death, it can be the small things, losing a job, getting fired, not getting into a school you want to get into, the breakups, the big things, death, cancer, incarceration, serious long-term unemployment. These things don't cure everything, but there are these psychological traps you can fall into, and I was falling into all three. He told me about them, and then he just kept pointing them out. So personalization, it's your fault. I blamed myself. I blamed myself for Dave dying. We originally thought he had fallen off an exercise machine. My brother's a neurosurgeon, and he kept telling me that wasn't true. But then we figured out, we had an autopsy, he died of coronary artery disease. I'm the only non-doctor in my family. I didn't understand why I couldn't diagnose it. Maybe I should have gone to medical school, as everyone told me all along. But I didn't diagnose it, I didn't solve it, I didn't fix it. Then when I kind of got over that, because everyone explained I wasn't a doctor, I was upset that I was inconveniencing everyone. All the people at Facebook that were taking meetings for me, my mom who gave up her life to live with me for a while. I said sorry, like always. Every sentence was, I'm sorry for this, I'm sorry for that. And so Adam told me I wasn't allowed to say sorry anymore.
Yeah, and then you were like, well, I apologize for. That's not okay either.
But Adam said, if you don't, he told me that if I didn't stop blaming myself, my kids couldn't recover, because I couldn't recover. And as we've done the resilience research, and I've learned from such great research Adam's done, it's not just forgiving yourself when it wasn't your fault. It's forgiving yourself when it was. Self-compassion turns out to be hugely important for recovery. We formed OptionB.org, and we put this TED Talk up. It's by this woman, and she has a story of another woman who got divorced, and a while after that was going on her first date, and she was all excited. And she gets dressed up, she goes, and the guy leaves after 10 minutes. And then, as she tells the story, she says, the friend said to her, you're unattractive and boring, of course he left. Right, there's the gasp, right? But a friend didn't say that to her. She said it to herself. A friend would never say the things we say to ourselves. Our friends are usually so much nicer than we are to ourselves. And finding self-compassion, there are tragedies that happen that are people's fault, and Adam and I on purpose included them in this book, and those people have to forgive themselves too. And that doesn't mean anything anyone does is okay, and there's not real responsibility, and there shouldn't be real punishment. That's not what we're saying. But what we're saying is when things happen, we have to find self-compassion. Speak to ourselves as we would to a friend. And men and women do this more, but we speak to ourselves much more meanly than we would ever to a friend. The second is pervasiveness. Is everything in your life, everything in my life is a disaster. And it definitely felt that way. It really felt that way. And the third was permanence, was Adam and others who had been through real loss, Adam with his experience, others saying it would feel better. And I did not believe it. The grief is still here, the sadness lingers, but it does not feel the way it did 2 years ago. I can breathe. There is no longer a boot sitting on my brother-in-law's chest. And we want people to know that those are the traps so they can help get not just themselves, but other people out of them.
You said, I think a long time after we began the discussion about the 3 Ps, you said, I wish I had known this when I was in college and in business school. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, I think these are actually really good thoughts, traps that you can all avoid, right? My first day of work after college, I went to the World Bank. Someone asked me to enter data into what was Lotus 123. It's a spreadsheet. I didn't know how to do that, even though I studied economics. And the guy who's a professor said to me, I can't believe you got this job not knowing how to do this, and left the room. So I went home crying to my 3 roommates from college and said, I'm about to get fired because the guy I work for just said I shouldn't have gotten the job, and it's only day 1. But it wasn't pervasive. I wasn't bad at everything. I was just bad at spreadsheets, and I learned. And then when I got divorced, I got divorced young and early. I was 25. I thought I was the biggest failure in the world. And I thought I would never recover. It would affect all areas of my life. And it was my fault. And so just applying those lessons to even the small stuff, I've already found can make a really big difference.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the discussions around how to imagine alternative paths. I remember just a couple of weeks after Dave passed away, we were sitting in your family room with your mom, and I told you that you should imagine how this could be worse.
So you all know this, Adam's one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. But when he said that, I looked at him like he was absolutely insane, right? I mean, how it could be worse? I just lost my husband, like suddenly with no warning. And he said, well, Dave could have had that same cardiac arrhythmia driving your children. And that happens, it happens to people. And the minute he said it, I was like, I'm good. Kids are alive, I'm fine. Right? I mean, that thought, I could have lost all three of them. And it's so counterintuitive because you would think that if you're trying to recover from hardship or tragedy, you should think positive thoughts. But actually thinking about what things could be worse helps us see what's still good in our life and what we can be grateful for. And it is the great irony of this journey for me and really studying resilience with Adam and Adam's brilliance to this, which is that you can come out of this, obviously lingering sadness, lingering grief, but more grateful. I am more grateful today than I was 2 years ago. More grateful for the gift of life itself. Something I just completely took for granted. It never occurred to me Dave wouldn't turn 48. God willing, I turn 48 in August. And my God, will that birthday mean a lot to me, just like 47 did. Just like every birthday everyone around me has. How many people have made a joke, oh, I'm turning, I guess, 20. I'm getting old. Come on, how many people have made an I'm getting old joke? If I can give you one thing today, don't do that. And I'm not joking, don't do that. My cousin Laura turned 50 2 months ago, and I called her and said, happy birthday. And I bet you woke up this morning with that, oh my God, I'm 50 thing. This is the year Dave doesn't turn 50. There are only two choices. We grow older, we don't. And if we do, it is a gift. And just appreciating that is what we talk about in the book, and Adam taught me, is post-traumatic growth. It is the things where you go through hardship that make your life better. And we believe deeply in pre-traumatic growth. Some of you have faced trauma. Some of you I got to meet, some of you I haven't, but a lot of you haven't. But what would you do if you knew you had a year left? How would you live? What would you do if you remembered that not everyone lives until your next birthday? You can have that gratitude right now, right here, and it's a pretty incredible thing.
So I think that surfaces the idea of privilege, which is you have had a lot to be grateful for. There are very few people who have the resources that you do, and who also have such great supportive friends who have benefited from your generosity for years and had a chance then to pay it back. I found it really interesting when we started writing about resilience that resilience research started with extremely disadvantaged groups, looking at children in severe poverty who had suffered violent abuse and asking how did some of these children come out so strong anyway? And I'm just wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about what you've learned from sort of comparing across the spectrum of resources that people have available.
Nothing prevented this for me or my kids, but I know how lucky we are in many ways still. And even in the face of trauma, resources matter. And I've thought a ton, and Adam and I have talked a lot about what it would be like, and a lot of people have this, to go through the trauma I went through and lose your house, and lose your apartment, and lose your job. About the single mother waking up every day in our country where our public policy is just abysmal, and has to choose between taking care of a sick child and losing a job that she needs. And it is interesting that the research, the book is my story partially, the book is also the research. And the book is lots of other amazing stories, some of which are from this community. They're people Adam knew, they're amazing. And the research and the other stories really come from people of all different backgrounds. And one thing we've thought a lot about, and we wrote a chapter about, is about collective resilience. Collective. I got through this because Adam's an unbelievable friend. You know, someone who could just be there emotionally and write with me and process with me and summarize data for me in ways that maybe wouldn't have helped others, but really helped me. But we build resilience in each other, and there are a lot of programs we talk about in the book that work with severely disadvantaged population. The Nurse-Family Partnership is one example. These interventions where they go to underprivileged families and they start visiting homes from pregnancy till 2 years. Those people 15 years later have, you know, half the incarceration rates or more than that. I mean, the numbers are outstanding what happens, and it just shows us that we have a deep responsibility to help prevent hardship, because hardship's not evenly distributed. Racism, disadvantage, poverty, those people who face that have more violence, more death, more job loss, all of these things that cause more illness. So we need to prevent that hardship in the first place, but then we need to help rebuild. And one of the things we are talking about is both the public policy, the corporate policy, but also trying to talk about and teach how we build collective resilience, because we have a responsibility to do a lot more than we do as a society.
In terms of what we can do as individuals to support other people who are suffering, I remember being a little stunned by a few of the, the comments that you faced. You know, the friend who said after a year, gee, aren't you done with that grief thing by now? Or the other so-called friend who said, you're just too angry and sad, it's hard to be around you. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what you learned about how to be a good or supportive friend.
Adam's joked that there's a whole section of self-help books, but there's no help other section. Help other section. We want our book and what we're doing with optionb.org to be in the help others section. And I realized I got a lot of this wrong before. Before I lost Dave, if someone was going through something hard, I would mention it the first time, maybe. I'm so sorry. And then I would never bring it up again, because if they wanted to talk, they should tell me, and I didn't want to remind them. That's ludicrous. You can't remind me I lost Dave. I know that. And you can't remind someone she went for chemotherapy this morning. You can't remind someone that his dad just went to jail. They know. And I'm not saying that every person will want to talk every time, but you can always acknowledge and always ask. I know you're suffering. I'm here if you want to talk. The other thing I learned was the power of not just offering to do anything, but doing something. Again, another thing I got wrong. I've said to many people, just let me know if there's anything I can do. And I meant that really kindly. I was coming from a good place, but the problem is when people said that to me, it shifts the burden to the person who needs the help to answer the question. And what do you say? Well, can you make Father's Day disappear so I don't have to live through it? Do something. My dear friends Dan and Esther Levy tragically lost a child, and they were in the hospital for many months. And a friend of his texted and said, what do you not want on a burger? A friend of mine read this book 2 weeks ago. Before it came out, I gave it to her. And she has a not close friend who has a child with leukemia, and they went back into the hospital. And she said before she read the book, she would have done nothing because she's not her best friend. How dare she impose? They're in the hospital with leukemia, but she read the book. So she went to the toy store, she bought a stuffed animal, she went to the hospital lobby, and she texted and said, I'm in the lobby in case you want this or you want to come down, but I'm leaving in 15 minutes. And the woman texted right away and said, please come up. And she gave the stuffed animal to the 4-year-old, and she said the mother was standing behind her crying, mouthing the words, thank you for showing up. You don't have to be someone's best friend from the first grade to show up with a burger. You don't. And you don't have to be someone's best friend to mention this. Asking is always right. It won't be the right thing to show up in all circumstances, but a lot more showing up and a lot more acknowledging would help a lot of people.
You were determined early on to make sure that you found joy. And I remember in the Facebook post you wrote, my least favorite sentence was, I will never feel another moment of pure joy again. I tried to talk you out of writing it. You wrote it anyway. You clearly should have listened to me.
I'm so often, when Adam and I disagree, he's almost always right. It's true.
I will say one of my moments of joy is proving you wrong, but in this case, I would have preferred not to have to. But I think that it was actually really interesting that you said, despite that, right? I'm going to search for joy, even though I don't believe that I'm going to find it. And you have found joy. Can you talk to us a little bit about how?
Well, it wasn't easy, and one of the sentences we write in the book that I really love is that joy is a discipline. It takes work, and it definitely takes work post-loss or grief, and it takes work for a lot of us anyway. About 4 months after Dave died, I went to a bar mitzvah, and a childhood friend pulled me on the dance floor, and we were dancing, and a minute in, I basically broke down, kind of had to be taken outside. It's kind of embarrassing. And I didn't know what was wrong, because it felt different than the grief I had been experiencing for 4 months, and then I realized, oh my God, I was happy for 1 minute, 4 months later. And then the guilt just washed through my body, just the guilt. How could I be happy when Dave was gone? How dare I be on a dance floor? And around that time, my brother-in-law called me crying on the phone, and he said, all Dave ever wanted was for you and your children to be happy. Don't take that away from him in death. So that was the permission. I needed permission to be happy. And I gave it to my kids early. I said, Daddy would want you to play. Daddy would want you to be happy, but I hadn't given it to myself. But then the question is how? And Adam really helped me. The day after that bar mitzvah, I came here with my kids, and I told Adam how I collapsed at the dance floor. He's like, of course you did. You don't do a single thing that would make anyone happy, right?
Yeah, you're working, you're taking care of your kids, and you're writing about grief in a journal. Like, sounds delightful.
But what Adam said is that I thought happiness was going to be the big things. We think happiness so often is, getting into Penn or Wharton, getting a job, having a kid. But happiness is the daily stuff, the small stuff. And Adam said, start doing things that are more fun. Even those that remind me of Dave. I took things back. My kids and I started playing Settlers of Catan again, even though Dave and I had been playing right before he died. I started watching TV again, even though Dave and I watched TV.
Well, hold on. Sheryl Sandberg watches TV.
Yeah, I do. I used to every night, but then I didn't because it reminded me of Dave. Everything fun reminded me of Dave. So I did none of it, but I took things back. I took back Game of Thrones, even though I don't really understand it now that Dave's not there. Oh, and you all don't either. It's very confusing. Unless you read the books, which Dave did, there's no way you understand who every little character is. And they die so quickly, you can hardly remember them. I took back Scrabble. Dave played with his brother Rob. Dave and Rob played, and now Dave and I played, and now Rob and I play. But I also started noticing, Adam suggested I write down 3 moments of joy in my journal before I go to bed. And I started doing it, and I still do it. And they weren't big. Had a cup of coffee. Someone told a joke. My son gave me a hug without being asked. Maybe hinted at, but not asked. But because I was going to write them down at the end of the day, I noticed them. I was like, oh, that makes the journal, and so I savored them more. And we have to give ourselves permission, and we have to give ourselves the tools. What we focus on is what we focus on. It doesn't mean there's joy every moment. There's not. There's still a lot of grief. But there is joy now, and there is pure joy now. There are moments I am happy, and I know Dave would want me to be.
I want to talk about gender, and there's one subject in the book, and I think issue core to your experience and your values that bridges the two, which is confidence. I've not known you as a person lacking in confidence, but pretty early on, yeah, you said, like, I don't feel like I can do anything.
Well, you certainly saw it after Dave died. I mean, I'd read about grief. And so when the anger came, when the sadness came, I had heard about that. Not in the amount they came, but I wasn't shocked. But what did shock me is really Dave's death trashed my self-confidence. And I had thought a lot about self-confidence. I wrote Lean In. And I had studied self-confidence. I definitely had trouble with it in college when I sat where you sat. I learned the data. Again, the data always helps me that women feel less self-confidence than men. I don't like sexism, even if it's in myself, so I really work to correct it. And in writing Lean In building the Lean In circles all around the world, I gave a lot of women a lot of advice on how to feel more self-confident, and I took that advice. when you're giving advice all day, you take it. And so I was feeling good. Like I deserved my job, like I could do my job, like I could be a good mother and work. Stuff I hadn't even felt a couple years before, but it was pretty solid. And then Dave's death just trashed it because I was now mothering by myself 2 grieving children. I didn't know how to do that. And I went back to work and I could barely focus through a meeting and not think about Dave, let alone contribute. And Mark Zuckerberg, 15 years younger than I am, I have no idea how he knew how to do this. What I used to do when someone was going through something hard at work is offer them time off. Really important. I think at Facebook we do this very well. I think other companies need to step up. Some do well. We need to do better. We need better public policy for those not covered by companies. But I would offer them time off. And I would say things like, well, of course, don't worry. Of course you can't fully focus. You look at what you're going through. But when people said that to me, that just proved what I knew, which is, oh my God, I can't do my job. And the pervasiveness, I've lost Dave, I'm gonna lose my job. I'm gonna lose everything. And then I'm gonna have nothing to do all day but grieve, because my kids are gonna be in school. It was very scary. But what Mark did is he said, oh, you would have made that mistake before. It was actually very comforting. When I fell asleep in the first meeting of the first day back, he's like, a lot of people fall asleep in meetings. I was like, who? He's like, a lot of people. But then he said, but you made 2 good points today, and here's what they were. And he built me back up. And now when someone's going through something hard, I offer them time off. I ask if they want the project taken off them. But if they don't, and if they're back, I say, do you want to do this? You're great at this. Or I take the time to compliment the little things that they might not have needed complimented before. And that's really important, because I think when we think about helping people get through trauma, through tragedy, through loss, through illness, through any of these things, it is comforting them and holding them as they cry and showing up at the hospital. It is also building them back up, telling them they can do their job, giving them permission to laugh and live.
So let's talk about how to support women more effectively. You have some pretty strong views about career advice for women. In particular, can you talk to us about how to manage a personal brand?
Oh my God. You don't have a brand. I get this question a lot, particularly from young audiences, and I shudder every time, so I'm so glad you asked it. If you think you are building your personal brand, please don't. You don't have a brand. Crest has a brand. Perrier has a brand. I work in marketing. These things are packaged up and marketed like products, but when I hear anyone talk about building their personal brand, I know that's not right. And the reason it's not right is that products are marketed. This is sparkling water. It is one of my favorites. It is put in a bottle that I really like with packaging I really like. But people are not that simple, and we're not packaged. And when we are packaged, we are ineffective and inauthentic. I don't think I have a brand, but I do think I have a voice. But it is not clear and consistent and wrapped the same way consistently. It is a voice that I used to help build a company. It is a voice that I spoke out on women. It is a voice that sometimes gets things wrong. I've gotten a lot wrong and a lot wrong publicly over the years. And it's a voice I now use to talk about grief and try to break some of the isolation I felt. If you think you are building a personal brand, you will not have the career you want to have, because you will not be authentic. Don't package yourself. Just speak. And speak honestly. I think speak with some data behind you. Don't assert things that aren't true. And speak from your experience and be clear what the differences are.
Sheryl, another topic you have strong views about. We know that women get much less mentorship and sponsorship than men do, and you want to change that.
Yeah, it is amazing. One of the things that happens pretty frequently to me, but does not, it's always women, is women will say, can you be my mentor? Women I don't know. And I would love that to be the case. But men never say that, and I really can't mentor someone I don't know. And no one really can. And I find it so striking that women ask that all the time and not men. The other thing, and this one I hate just as much as I hate the brand thing, is, will you be on my personal board of directors? No. 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 You don't have a personal board of directors because you're not a company. Much like you're not a bottle of Perrier. You're not a product. And I really feel strongly about this. I have mentored a lot of people. I mentor a lot of people. And they are people that I've met through work, through organically, who also are working on things with me. If 2 people start Facebook today, and this happens all the time, I will try to see anyone I can. 3 months in, one person comes to see me and says, you're really important here, so I'd like you to help me. I'll try. But 3 months later, someone else comes and says, I've been working here for 3 months or 6 months or 3 years, and I've noticed this, and I think we got this wrong, or I think you've got this wrong, or I don't understand why we do it this way. I'm so much more likely to mentor the second person because the second person just made a really good point. Or a third person picks up and solves a problem. If you ask someone to be on your personal board of directors, you are asking them to do for you. And you're not giving them any tools to do it. The way we build the relationships where you really mentor people are by working with them and by helping them. So don't ask someone if you can be on their personal, they can be on your personal board of directors. Ask someone if they have a problem you can solve, and they will then wind up advising you. And I'm so sad the way we keep telling women to ask for help that way. Not because we don't need help, we all need help, but because it's not gonna work. The other thing that is so powerful is peer mentorship. When I was sitting where you're sitting, you know, if I had fast forwarded to my career, there was no internet. So I could not have figured out I would go to Google and Facebook. But the people over the years that told me not to go to Google and not to go to Facebook were my mentors. The people who told me to take those jobs over others, older media jobs, were my peers. And it's been proven that peer mentorship can be just as important. Lean-in circles are one way of doing it. We now have 30,000 in 150 countries. We grow by over 100 a week. We have some here. Get yourself into a group. It can be through Lean-in or through any program, and mentor each other. And do a great job and solve a lot of problems. And that is the only way to get real mentors at work.
I want to ask
and
about...
then join a board. You can be on someone else's real board one day.
There's one little wrinkle in that, I think, in the, try to help the person whose mentoring you want, which is, every once in a while, I'll have a student come to office hours and say, how can I help you? And I just recoil because it feels like a violation of the professor-student relationship. Like, I became a professor because I want to be helpful, not because I want my students to help me.
But generic offers, much like in option B, aren't as good. How about, I think this case study could make your class better.
Case studies are terrible. That's why I don't teach at Harvard.
Okay, sorry. All right. Okay. Went to the wrong school. How about, I talked to 5 people after that lecture, and these are 3 ways I think it could be better, and I wrote it up for you. That is being helpful. You'll take that. Or how about, I think we would benefit if we did a project or we did a survey, and I wrote it up, or I'd like to do that. Can I take the initiative?
Yeah. That works.
That'll work. Don't do the case studies. I didn't like them that much either, to be honest.
Can you talk a little bit more about how women can help each other?
Yeah, and I think this is really important. I think there's this myth out there that women don't help other women, and it's grounded in some reality. And it's historically, historically, if you were the one woman or 2 women, there really was room for one promotion because it was a situation where there was going to be one woman in the room, one woman in the room, if any. So historically there was, I think, the queen bee syndrome people talk about, but I don't think that's true anymore. And one of the things that happens is that women get less credit for the ideas they put forward. Women get less credit for the work they do. And if you're a man and you take credit, that usually goes pretty well, or at least better for a woman. If you try to take credit, that's badly. But saying, my dear friend Mindy is here, she's an alum, Mindy did a great job on that project. That is a win-win. I look communal and helpful, and I'm supporting someone else. She gets the credit she deserves. Jumping in and helping Mindy with, we're going to do this together. We really can help each other. It's also an easy way to point out the biases which exist. They exist everywhere. They exist at Facebook. I'm sure they exist in the classroom here. Going to a professor and saying, you know, the women are getting interrupted more than the men. Sometimes it's easier, it's great to do it when it's you, but when it's not you. I just watched these 3 women get interrupted today. We speak for each other and for ourselves. I don't want to dissuade anyone for speaking up for themselves, but sometimes we're not as good at that. Helping each other is a very good path to correcting bias, building careers.
That speaks a little bit to the biases that often hold women back. And I will say I've had, over the past few years, quite a few undergrads and MBAs, men come by and say, look, you know, I understand that there's supposed to be a lot of biases that, you know, that may hurt women, but I don't think those exist today the way they used to. And also, you know, I see all these, you know, like career recruiters, OCR people coming and like creating special opportunities for women. That feels like it's disadvantaging men. And I always want to say back to them, look, if you actually read the data, I'm pretty convinced that there is not a single white man who in a lifetime will face the same kind of bias that a typical woman does in a week. But
particularly a minority woman.
Especially, but it's often hard to make that case. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you view those situations that feel very zero-sum.
No, we do. We know through the data that, that white men, particularly young white men, believe that the deck is stacked against them because there's a lot of talk about diversity. Someone asked me that, who was a young employee at Facebook, and I just looked at him and I said, God, if we're biased for women and minorities, do we suck? Right? Because we don't have enough women, and we don't have enough underrepresented minorities in senior ranks. So if we're actually biased, we're doing it really badly. It's hard to imagine there's bias against male leadership with 95% of the Fortune 500 CEO holding those jobs. And this is important, 30% more first promotions last year for men than women, based on the most comprehensive survey done, which is the Lean In McKinsey survey of over 100 companies. 30% more first promotions for men with the same tenure. So if there's bias the other way, it sure isn't showing up in the data. And I think we need to recognize that the biases are really real, and we need to call them out and explain what they are. And it's definitely gender. A man can be competent and liked because as he gets more powerful and considered more competent, we like him more. Women face a trade-off. As they get more powerful, we like them less. You could give out a resume, this same resume with a white-sounding name and a black-sounding name, and the white-sounding name will get 50% more callbacks. It's worth 8 years of experience in the workforce to have a white-sounding name over a black-sounding name. That is recent data. The biases are real. You audition orchestra members behind a screen, and all of a sudden you hire more women. Some of those women were backups. They were whatever they call them, understudies. No, I forgot what they call that. Understudy. They were playing in the orchestra as subs, but they didn't realize they were that good until they were behind a screen because they were women. And so the data is super clear on this, and I think we have to make sure that we are willing to call out the biases without making people feel. I think the other answer is we have to recognize that a more equal world where people were given equal opportunity given equal opportunity without regards to race, without regards to gender, would be a better world. We would be more productive, our companies would be better run, our kids would be happier and do better in school. And so it's better for everyone. This is not a zero-sum game. Economic growth moves a lot of companies up, and we could have more of it.
One more question before we go to the audience questions. I get a lot of students, some who are here in the audience today, asking what I think of their 12-year career plan or the 15-year path they've mapped out. What would you like to say to those students?
Yeah. So the trash can with the personal brand and the personal board of directors, you put your 6-year plan?
Sure.
Yeah. When I was where you are, Mark Zuckerberg was in elementary school. And so if I had mapped out my career, I would not be here. I would not and could not be here. You need a long-run dream. And think about what it is and make it big and ambitious, particularly if you're a woman, particularly if you're an underrepresented minority. You can do anything, but white men too. All of us, you can do anything. We don't want to leave you out. But I want to be clear why I say it that way. We know that performance of minorities and women is systematically underestimated compared to white men. And we know that it's systematically underestimated by them as well as other people. And so there's a reason I said that. So we take a minute and everyone, ambitious. Doesn't mean you need to be CEO. I know not everyone wants a corporate job, but ambitious to make a difference in the world, to live your dreams. Ask yourself what you would do if you weren't afraid. Long run. And then ask yourself, what am I doing in the next year or two to get there? You know, year, 2 years, I say 18 months because it feels kind of in the middle. It is a great idea to map that out. And it's not just what you're going to do and what's going to go on your resume, something people worry about too much now. It's what skills am I going to learn? What am I bad at that I might need to get better at? Try that. Don't build the perfect resume. No one buys those anyway. Give yourself the opportunity to fail and to do the stuff you don't think you can do yet, because you're going to need those later. And map out the next year or two of skill building, of investing in yourself. And do not try to connect the short-term plan to the long-run dream, because you will miss opportunities because Facebook didn't exist. And I believe that so strongly. I think you all grew up in a much more structured world than I did. And even the world I grew up in is pretty structured. It doesn't work that way. Careers are a jungle gym, not a ladder. Move sideways and backwards, be willing to try new things, but don't tie yourself up in knots building the perfect resume or building the perfect long-run plan, because it will hold you back. It really will.
So we're taking, sure. We're taking audience questions. We have a really interesting platform called Facebook that you can use to submit. You can submit them on the Authors at Wharton page for those who are interested. We have a bunch already. So here's one that I like. I'll add a little bit of color to this too. Facebook has redefined what it means to be a friend, or at least broadened the term friendship. And I will say this took on personal meaning for me when one day you introduced me as your friend, and I didn't realize we were friends. How do you actually define a friend, and what do you think of when you think of friendship?
I mean, there are your closest friends, your more distant friends, but I think a friend is someone who has your interests at heart and wants things to go well for you, and someone who will be there when things are hard and celebrate when things are good.
Go on.
I mean, I think that's it, actually. I think it's pretty simple. It takes different forms. We need different things from our friends over different years, but.
Do you have a term for those people who are like in between friend and colleague or acquaintance?
I don't know if I spend a lot of time thinking about what you call that, but I think it's nice to think of the world as filled with a lot of friends. I think losing Dave taught me that there's a lot I could do for friends. There's a lot they did for me. It's a pretty special thing to have people that care about you and have the people you can keep in touch with over the course of your life.
There are several people who want us to talk a little bit about the process of writing option B. My recollection of it was I would receive usually a journal entry from you and then read it and give feedback, and then I would draft some research and I would get like a lot of track changes about 4 seconds later. And I'm wondering what you remember from it.
I mean, so Adam and I, it's been, for me, one of the best, if not the best collaboration, certainly writing I've had in my career. We wrote together before. We wrote a New York Times series on women in leadership based on the data and experience. And this book really has 3 parts. It's my story, which come from my journal entries. Not everything, of course, I don't share everything, but some of that. And some research, and Adam always wrote the first draft of that. And then a lot of other people's stories of just amazing people who have faced all kinds of adversity and learned a lot that they can share. And we kind of split writing those up. And I know that as much as Adam helped me get through this and is still helping me because I'm still getting through it, the process for me of writing was so important. You know, I like writing the first drafts when I do. I like editing. He likes writing. He likes editing. Finding one voice was hard. We wrote the book. We started writing it as we, because it really is we. We both wrote it together, but it couldn't read well. So much of it was my story. So we went back to first person singular, and Adam. I say Adam. That part's a little weird, but there was like no other way to do this. But the writing process itself was, for me, was really, really a fun one.
Two final questions. One is, can you tell us a little bit about how you would go back and live college or business school differently?
Oh my God. Yes, I'm so glad to get that question. My son, his basketball team, lost the playoffs. And all the other little boys were pretty upset. This happened a few weeks ago, and some were crying. And I said, "Are you okay?" And he was, "Mom, this is 6th grade basketball." I'm fine. But what he was saying was that his friends hadn't lost their father. So they thought it was a super big deal. I am sure there are students here that super big deal things are happening to. Some of you are losing parents. Some of you do have cancer. Some of you are facing life-threatening illnesses. But the rest of the stuff, please, some perspective. Students are so nervous. I promise it is not going to matter to your career if you are elected president of whatever club you are forming. And it's not really going to matter, I hope this is okay, Dean, if you get like an A or a B or whatever form you use for that, if you even have grades here. Do you have grades here? Just checking after the whole case study fiasco. But most of everything I worried about in college and business school was silly. And that doesn't mean, I'm not trying to belittle it at all. I'm not. I know the breakups are real. Working hard on classes are real. It just doesn't have this importance I thought it did. And perspective would have made me understand it better and deal with it better. And I do think for whatever reason, students today, and I do interact with a lot of them, we do a lot of recruiting, are anxious. And like I have something to tell you, you guys go to Wharton and Penn, you're gonna be fine. There are a lot of people in our society who are gonna have a hard time getting jobs. That's not you. It's very clear. That's not you. And so some laughter, some perspective, do the stuff you enjoy, you will be better at it, will help you a lot. And I wish I had known that more when I was in school. What I would do to take art history now. I mean, what a fun thing to take. It was harder for me than the economics I majored in. I stressed a lot. Now I just wish I enjoyed it, because when I go to museums, I don't remember stuff, and I think that's because I was so nervous about it.
So Sheryl, in closing, you're the leader I admire most. But more than that, you're the friend for me who has redefined what it means to be a giver. And I'm just so grateful that you were willing to come here with all the priorities that you have on your plate. I am aware, though, that there's a little bit of a bittersweet flavor to this visit, because you disappointed some very important family members by not coming to Penn. And in lieu of that,
my mom wanted me to come to Penn.
Maybe we'll draw you back to teach a class one day. But in lieu of that, I wonder if you could just share, as a would-be alum, your wishes for the audience.
Oh, I like that. I will say that Adam has redefined friendship for me. I believe to the extent I have been able to find joy and happiness in my life, Adam is just a ginormous part of that, because he showed up, and he showed up often. He did what Dan's friend did. He didn't just show up with a burger. He showed up with the information and the love and the support I needed. And I know his dear wife couldn't be with us tonight because kids are sick, but she did too, and I'm so grateful for both of them. And wishes for all of you, wow. I wish that you focus on what you care about, that you do the things you believe in, that you believe it's gonna work out. Even when it didn't work out, when I lost my husband so suddenly, there's another side, there's another day, there's another laugh, there's another cup of coffee, and there's another day to cry too. Last year, right around now, Dave died on May 1st. It was 11 days before May 1st. A friend of mine had this conversation, and we talked about how a year before, Dave had 11 days left, and we had no idea. How would I have lived my life if I had 11 days left? And I don't mean blow off your classes, because it turns out that like investing in yourself and doing real things, it's not about partying all the time, even though some of that's good. But what would you do with your life if you knew it was limited? Katie Couric interviewed me and Adam on the stage in New York on Sunday. It was our first book event. And she said something pretty profound. She said, everyone's terminal. Everyone's terminal, like you only have so many days left, and you actually, none of us, we don't know how many they are. Live them. Worry less, live more, love more, more joy. I wish that so deeply for all of you. Thank you.